I know you through your film Aya Awakenings and one of my favorite podcasts, In a Perfect World.
Mm-hmm.
And you also have a book based on the movie.
Also called Aya Awakenings, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And a new project now, Shamans in a Global Village. Would you like to tell us about that?
Yeah, so basically this is my 10th anniversary of working with sacred medicines, predominantly ayahuasca. And, I feel that for the depth of the intensity of the journey or journeys you have, there's also an equal time of integration. Mm-hmm. And so for me, when I first went down to Iquitos and experienced ayahuasca and was writing about it for what started out for a magazine article and then became this 3-month, 30-chapter book, it took like a few years to get the book out and then the marketing the book, and then that was in 2006. So at the apex of launching the book, the film started with the director of the film, Tim Parrish, and Lulu Medill, who did the soundscapes. So we did a spoken word readings from the book, and they essentially became the backbone for the film. And then that took me all the way through to about early 2014. So, I was on like an 8-year journey of literally really integrating through, I say, like my words and my media as my medicine, and making shamanic artifacts and trying to anchor and capture some of the essence of these experiences through my own personal lens to comment on a more tribal and group initiation I think we're all going through essentially as a species these days with mediated plant and earth medicine activation. Mm-hmm. And so all of that has been this overarching journey that's taken me up to my 10th anniversary now, and we're just launching a new venture called shamansoftheglobalvillage.com, and it's essentially a documentary series which is planned for about 6 to 12 episodes to look at the different entheogenic medicines that the earth secretes herself to bring humans into right relationship and to have this sort of ally relationship with the spirits and the medicines, and to look at the role of the shaman, look at the role of the medicine person, a man or woman who has connection from the earth, producing these substances, to then the substances themselves, and then the human who's the vessel or the caretaker of the spirit. And often indigenous people have been caretakers of these plants and medicines, and now there's a new generation of Western people who are going through the growing pains and also the responsibility and the learning curve of taking on board what it means to be medicine people or shamans in the global village. So I say there's this rebalancing happening around the earth, where it's not just about indigenous people. Essentially, we're all indigenous to the planet, but a lot of the Western culture, what Terence McKenna used to call dominated culture, the ego culture that has spread out to all areas of the world and infected with this globalism and this egoism, which I feel as well as also not just a byproduct, but as a direct result of, I guess the shorthand for it is seasons of consciousness or world ages that we've been in that there seems to be now a fruition point and a tipping point and a blossoming of this new energy coming through from the planet herself and then from deeper galactic sources, which fits this idea of many, indigenous cultures have had of world ages. And so we're seeing this global shamanic resurgence, which, is fruiting almost everywhere around the planet, with Westerners who have inherited the dogmas and the energies and the egoic structures and the wounds of 6,000 to 10,000 years of his story. Right. And so what we really hope to do with Shamans of the Global Village is to show this lineage between the planet and the plants and earth medicines and the people. And so that includes the indigenous caretakers now handing the baton to the Westerners, so we can become unified and we can recognize ourselves more as one tribe, who is connected to the earth and is resonating in right relationship with the earth. That's essentially the gist of the show. So the first episode we shot last year in Mexico with Dr. Octavio Rettig, who's a Mexican-trained doctor who works with the Bufo alvarius toad medicine, which contains the Western idea of the chemical of 5-MeO-DMT. Now, 5-MeO-DMT is also endogenous to the human brain. It's in plant kingdom. It's in different animals as well.
In a sense, we're neurologically wired for it.
We're hardwired for God. That's what it is, essentially. I mean, I have a bit of a soundbite mechanism in me. Like I just conjugate this language, but I feel that's part of my gift of, it doesn't come from here, it comes more from the heart. But 5-MeO DMT and the tryptamines essentially are almost like, God's backdoor access that he's put into the species to connect us to unity consciousness, to source itself. So, you have to watch the episode because these are all buzzwords and these might just sound like words, but it's a very profound medicine, very, very profound medicine. Like I feel that in my training, someone said to me years ago that the different entheogens are like baubles on the different branches of a Christmas tree or the tree of life itself, and that the 5-MeO is the star at the top of the tree, it's the light. And what I see in my 8-year integration process of integrating what I went through in Aya Awakenings and becoming part of the global medicine community is that it's a process, and there's different levels of this process going on all at the same time in holographic perfection, right? And we get the medicines we need when it's time for them. And there's essentially a paralleling cascade going on that I feel that in the 60s, the Western culture had LSD as a opening of the mind, and we needed that because we were so distanced from the garden, because white picket fence of America and the Allies essentially post World War II won the war, but it was the inheritance of mechanistic Victorian culture, which had been, the whole split between mind, body, and science and alchemy and magic and rationalism and, God is dead. All these isms and all these accrued cultural forms culminated post World War II in this empire which had conquered the world. And it's the same empire which for 6,000 years had started to kill off all the medicine people and the witches and the herbal people. And when it went back to indigenous cultures in the first world, started to repress and see as work of the devil, the magic mushrooms or the washuma cactus, or it could not handle ego-dissolving substances that connected to a larger energetic ecology. So at that exact moment, the LSD revolution happened. It came through the lab with Albert Hoffman, and essentially, there's a whole story there, but essentially what I feel is that LSD helped open the mind and it helped release a planetary blockage. A generation later, and these are all lab-based things, but ecstasy, there was an ecstasy revolution that helped open the heart. A generation after that, the plant medicine movement started to really peak in the West, predominantly with ayahuasca, which helped to really tune in and open the soul. So there seems to be, to me, a cascade culturally over 20th century and the 21st, preparing us to return to the garden, because white picket fence America wasn't ready for the plants, because it was the inheritor of dominated culture which had severed the connection to the plants. So we had to go through these permissions and protocols and portals of initiation to now have this global plant and entheogen-based movement. And so even within the plant-based movement, I see that there's essentially most of the entheogens are very good at healing, and some of them help specifically with addictions, some of them help just reveal things we've suppressed or open us up to the web of life and reconnect us. The original Latin word for religion is to reweave or to reconnect, and then you got to ask to what, and it's to spirit, right? And so after a decade of working with ayahuasca, who I still dearly love and work with and do ayahuasca retreats at least once a year down in Peru with my curandero Percy Garcia Lozano, last year I was introduced to the toad medicine with Dr. Octavio Redig, and then everything changed very rapidly. And I started to see that there's, even within the plant medicines, it's like they're cleaning and cleansing and healing us. And then if we return to our default state, to our optimal electromagnetic frequency of being open, then we can receive the light. And it seems like the light, as the analogy at the top of the Christmas tree, is what is really coming onto planet Earth through the shamanic movement at the moment. So, funnily enough, Shamans of the Global Village documents episode 1, this work with the toad medicine, and then hopefully episode 2 is going to be documenting Iboga in Gabon, and we've essentially want to go around the planet and look at the connection of the medicines and the medicine people and what's going on with this movement, this shamanic movement, and how that, what's the value of it, how does it help us make us better people, how does it connect us to ourselves and to the planet, to our communities, and to spirit, because, being a medicine person yourself, these are incredibly profound experiences that our birthright and are really something which, you know, connects us to what's really going on and what's really important. If there's ever really going to be a change on planet Earth with the emergency we have, not just ecologically, but politically, socially, economically, we need to change not just our consciousness, but we need to open our heart. And I think that's what these substances are very good at doing.
Probably the root of all of it.
Yeah.
And so I feel it's no accident that these medicines are on the move. They're reaching a lot of people quite rapidly right now. Do you sense that that's related to the ecological, social, political state?
Yeah, I do. I mean, there's a few commentators that have said this, and they've said this for about a couple of generations now, all the way back to the 60s. Even again with the LSD, there were commentators like Bear Owsley, one of the famous acid chemists, and Gerald Hurd, another writer, who saw this connection, because what the entheogens, they all have different facets of this, but especially working with the toad medicine with 5-MeO, which is essentially unity consciousness and deep source consciousness and this holographic awareness, not just of all space-time as one, but I have this little riff where, like, you know, we've talked previously about Bardo states and the different gradations of frequencies of energetic intelligence and awareness. And, you know, ultimately there's this inner cartography of deep source, of like the white light void, intelligent, loving, radiating being of love that is deep source itself. And then around the event horizon, I have really felt both ancestors and future us's, and like all of us, like, you know, magnetic tape overwriting itself, contained within the printout of deep source as it goes from source to the event horizon, to the bardos, to then the material world. And within that, there's they all have a role. They all have a different role with what the entheogens are doing.
Question. So the shamans in a global village. What do you feel that we have to learn as babies to these medicines? You know, we have cultures coming together right now. Systems are changing. Even sometimes the way the medicine is used is changing as we're interfacing with these indigenous wisdom traditions. What do we have to learn in the West, and how will this show help support that meeting of souls?
You know, the number one thing I think we have to learn in the West, and it's not just the West, because, you know, it's not an easy dichotomy to say the West has got it all wrong and the East, or the old world, new world. I know what you mean, but as a metaphor, the West,
as newbies to these medicines and these ways, how can we show up in a good way?
Well, we can be coached in it, or we can be ready, you know, or we can think we'd be ready and at least show up and put the effort into. It's an initiation. So, Joseph Campbell, the famous academic and, you know, study of mythology around the world scholar, he had this idea of there's 3 phases. There's departure, initiation, and return. And so essentially we've departed from the intimacy of understanding the interconnectedness, what many indigenous cultures might say mitaquiasan or wankantanka, or, you know, the great spirit which threads throughout and animates and breathes life into and is all things in manifest forms. And many indigenous cultures, whether they took entheogenic substances or not, and many of them did, they would use different modalities to connect to that unity, that feeling of interconnectedness. And within that feeling of interconnectedness is this key term, right relationship. And everything is in relationship. This is what, you know, physics and quantum physics and science can tell us, but, you know, that's more mental. But to feel that in our hearts, to feel that there is no separation between us and the wind on the water, or the flowers blossoming in the essence of their perfection from the plants, or, you know, another animal or another human being. We have this loneliness of individuation, and that time is coming to an end. I really feel this. So to get back to what you just said before about this ecological issue, is we can think that we are responding to an ecological crisis, and wouldn't it be nice to be sustainable and eat organic food and to look at the food chain and how our actions affect each other? That's still the mind. That's still the empire of the mind, which is what got us into this problem in the first place. And so the empire of the mind needs to unify with the empire of the heart. And when that happens, this is what many indigenous cultures say. In Peru, they have this legend of the eagle and the condor. And it's the east and the west, but it also represents the mind and the heart. And many sacred teachings across the world understand this. You know, the heart has brain cells in it, and it has its own capacity to think. This is what science can tell us. But we need to be in touch with this intuition and this heart medicine, you know, that really, to feel that we are not, you know, what I understand now is like, what I understand in the heart is like, we think we're one finger, you know, we think we're an individual, and then you start to realize that we're all connected, and that the thing that's animating, it's like the hand of God is there. But even that is just a transitory step into realizing you're this macro structure, and the macro structure is the planet. It's like we're all nerve endings of God in matter, of the divine source expressing itself. And I really truly believe that every path leads to God. You can find your own path. This is nothing to be pushed. These are sacred medicines and protocols and initiations, and life itself is an initiation. It will initiate you, because this is the time for planetary initiation, and this is why we have a planetary emergency, to a large part caused by our consciousness, and to another large part caused by the phase we're in cosmic cycles. So we're not all to blame. That, as well as seasons of between the ice ages and sort of geological sort of time on the earth, I believe there's also seasons of consciousness, and that, you know, the last 10,000 years or so we've done the best we have, but now there's this shift in world ages, which many indigenous cultures point to as well, and that we're coming into unification, and we're coming back into a golden age, essentially. And that means really deeply knowing in a mind-heart unification what it means not just to be human, but to be the human family as part of the earth family, to be interconnected with all the species, with the plants and the animals and the wind and the sun and the light and the source, and to hear it and to feel it and to come home again, you know. That's where I feel we're at. And so it is my great hope that in documenting as best I can, you know, the experiences of the shamans of the global village, and going around and working with the different entheogens and the medicine people, that we hold a bit of charge. We get some authenticity and some rawness. This is a independently produced documentary series which we are relying upon the community to help fund. We're going to be doing a series of crowd funds for each episode going forward. We did the first episode on our own, and it is some incredibly immaculate and impeccable cinematography and direction and encapsulation of the path of these shamanic practitioners, and through them the medicine path, I think, of all of us coming home.
Beautiful. Thank you. How can people find you and donate?
So we have a website, shamansoftheglobalvillage.com, and the show is launching on October 1st, 2016. And I have a little riff. I have many riffs, but I basically, you know, they say it takes a tribe to raise a child. I feel it takes a tribe to support a documentary series and independent filmmakers. And, you know, what I really, really deeply feel as well is that they say, you know, the time of the lone wolf is over, and it's time for us to come together. It's time for us to support each other. It's time for us to grow together. And so I'm really asking for the support of the global tribe, for people that are connected to medicines, plant medicines, people interested in shamanism, in spirit, in growth, in evolution, in coming home and coming together. We're just the crest of a wave here in documenting what's going on, and it's millions of people around the world who are engaged in this process of discovery, and it's nothing new, this process of remembrance of what the plant medicines are revealing within ourselves, because it's not like a Western thing. You take this thing and you have this experience. You're engaging in a relationship with the spirit in the plant or the substance, the sacrament, and also within yourself, and then also with source. And so this is a global movement. It's a shamanic movement which is about reconciliation and remembrance. And so when we document this in the show, it's your show. It's your show. It's for you people who are doing this work, and we say, please join us. Aho.
Oh.
Yeah!
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, do you also have a separate nonprofit for the Toad Project, or is this?
Gosh, I'm a busy man, I can say, yes. So, well...
'Cause there's more. It's
there's
separate.
more,
It's
there's
a
more.
separate project.
There is no separateness. There really isn't. It's all just extensions of the same
arm
thing.
of this.
Well, another project when I'm not doing Shamans of the Global Village or raising children or doing other things, I co-founded a 501c3 not-for-profit last year called the Terra Incognita Project. So it's the Latin word terra for earth. And terra incognita essentially means the invisible landscape, or the landscape within that can't be seen. But what we're really interested in doing, we call it Neuro-shamanism. And in countries where it's legal, like in Mexico and other countries around the world, working with the sacred Bufo various toad. Again, I feel this is nothing new. The thing about the toad medicine is that there's, as you'll see in episode 1 of the Shamans of Global Village, it's been documented throughout many different Mesoamerican cultures, with the Maya, with the Aztec, with the Olmecs, over hundreds of years. And there's anthropological research, there's so much iconography showing things like, Quetzalcoatl and then the toad there, and they're wearing the crisscross sort of lattice work and that's on the toad, and they show the toad with the glands where the venom is secreted and milked and then scraped and smoked. There's evidence anthropologically, but there's no lineage that exists in the Mesoamerican cultures. The toad's native to the Sonoran Desert and over into America, into New Mexico and areas like that. But essentially, it's almost as if we're having to remember from the medicine itself what's going on, and to learn, not just as shamanic practitioners, but the Terra Incognita Project is really interested in uniting the hemispheres and working with... it comes back to originally my first experience with 5-MeO.
Uniting the hemispheres on the earth and the brain.
Because there's no separation. As above, so below. This is an ancient alchemical saying, that everything is not just interdependent, but reflects on different levels. So we've been working with different neuroscientists, and the reason for this, I guess, I was thinking about this last week, is that 10 years ago when I was doing the Ira Awakenings book, or On the Journey, which became the book and then the film, Chapter 7, if you read in the book, is all about 5-MeO DMT, because out of the blue, there I was in Iquitos, had done 3 ayahuasca ceremonies, and then I heard about this neuroscientist, Dr. Juan Acosta, who works with EEG and a headset and 19-channel recordings of the brain, and was working with Ron Wheelock, who had a source of 5-MeO DMT at the time. And 5-MeO DMT was totally legal across the world until about 2011. So this was all completely legal. But essentially my first experience was, with a blindfold, with a Western shaman, with a neuroscientist present. So my imprint and my 2 figures that did it, one was science and one was shamanism. And I went in and we recorded it, and the 9 minutes is in the film. What you don't see as much in the film is the interior heart-based recognition of pure source, and that's in the book, and some of the dialogue in the film captures that. But that set the imprint, and 10 years ago I wasn't ready to go back into deep source like that. I didn't need to go back. It was such a profound experience. I think that's why I've spent 8 years anchoring it. And then what happened on the tour of the film, I meet up with Dr. Juan Acosta again, we start talking about things, and we're like, you know what, let's do this. Let's form a scientific legal body that can research what's going on in the brain, and because the technology is now increased and there's a lot more ability to record with fine detail neurological changes of the brain, and work with medicine. And it's a real challenge, because the tryptamine arousal and the expression of energy in the body, there's so many facets to this, but essentially I feel that as well as a 5-MeO deep connection to source, on more edge doses, source energy comes into the body, and you can still have enough ego to recognize what's going on, but it's essentially at play in the fields of the Lord, that this energy comes in and you recognize that you're just a finger on the hand, and it's come into you. But within that state, we've been getting some interesting data on what's happening neurologically, essentially after a 5-MeO dose in broad strokes, and obviously we're aiming for scientific rigor and to replicate this, professionally. But essentially there seems to be proof of a more of a resonance and a cohesion and a unification of left-right brain hemispheres after having done the medicine. And it's very delicate work because there's a lot of movement of the body, and we're seeing a lot of spontaneous expressions of Vedic truths like mudras, expression of mudras from the hands, asanas and body positions, yogic moves, breath work, all of these ancient technologies which, these Eastern sort of cultures embodied, seem to happen statistically enough to people on 5-MeO organically from the medicine and the source energy shaping the body without the mind being involved at all. And it's like it's showing us how to be antennas or how to be receptacles for the energy and how to express it, how to express the divine energy on earth in ways that match pretty identically a lot of these Sanskrit and Vedic cultures. And I've talked to many people.
Medicine is mentioned in the Vedas, and apparently there's some evidence that there were ayahuasca analogs along the Silk Road.
Yeah.
So at the beginnings of yoga and these traditions, they very likely could have been our earliest teachers.
Well, this is what I mean. I mean, when we work with plant medicines in general, when we let go of the ego, I think what many of us realize is the teacher's not just the shaman in the room, it's the spirit of the plant itself. It's the medicine. So these medicines are the teachers. And with 5-MeO, it's not that it's like just the spirit of the toad medicine. It reveals and takes away all those 50,000 veils of separation between you and God and lets Source in. And Source essentially says, clean up your temple. Clean up your temple and I'll come hang out. And you don't need the external trigger because nature, Source, has built in the endogenous capacity for these tryptamines. So we talked a little bit earlier about these world ages, and I believe that the cascade of medicines and the healing is culminating in this resurgence of 5-MeO. And it's not just through toad medicine or a synthetic. I believe what we're being asked to do is to find the on switch again. The deep inner galactic on switch that says, here's what all these previous cultures on the earth had access to, and it's within you, and now it's time again. And so, that might sound really new age and really out there and really hippie. So there's that aspect, shamanic aspect, right? But we have incredibly top 1% neuroscientists in their field who are interested in the physiological and neurological aspects and are rigorous scientists and are going to be doing some microdose studies with toad. Hopefully, we've been working with helping integrate people that have had trauma or slight sort of PTSD symptoms from not having good integration with toad medicine. We've been helping sponsor a Bufo various sustainability study in the Sonoran deserts. And we're only a year old. So we really, really need your support with this. The URL is the Terra, TERRA -incognita-project.org. And it's exciting times, and we really appreciate the support of everyone, because what's being revealed here, is that this is a group effort. This is a group reclamation of these sacred spaces and of these modalities. And I think in unifying the science and the shamanism, even though it's very challenging and there's different languages and protocols between the two communities, this is what we're aiming to do. And it's a long-term goal, it's a long-term work we're doing, and it's the best work in town.
I've seen a lot of fruit being born from the meeting of the shamans and the scientists. That we're doing great work as beings by coming together.
Shamans are scientists. I mean, it's almost an affront to the cultural integrity. When I work with the curanderos in Peru, they say this is the science of curanderismo, and they call it a science. They spend 20 years or more to become a master of the diet, of cleansing their body, and then to be sensitive enough to communicate with the plant spirits. And all the vast, literally like tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of different plants and the spirits therein, and then the celestial hierarchies. And if they do one thing wrong, it has just as much a big reaction as a scientific experiment.
I feel that.
It's different paradigms, but it's same archetypes.
And it is. And not to say that it's not science, there's semantics at play where these two streams of Western science and then the worlds of shamanism sometimes have very different ways of getting information, very different ways of studying, very different ways of research, and great beauty is happening with the coming together and the mutual respect. And so thank you for that work. It's wonderful to know about all that you are up to, and thank you also for being one of the earliest experiential journalists that really didn't just look at the shamanic experience from the outside, but you actually jumped in and let the whole world watch. And I love Aya Awakenings for being, it's much more than a documentary. It's an art film, and it's poetry, and it's spoken word, and it is in a genre all its own. So
yeah, I like to say that it's a shamanic artifact, because all the dialogue in the film Aya Awakenings is taken directly from the book, which was taken directly from the experience and channeled in ceremonies and in the moment. So it was fresh. It was like minted fresh directly from the intuitive connection from source. And now it's anchored in the container of the film with special effects and with overlays and with narrative sort of cues and things like that. But to be a container to transmit the essence of the experience. So as opposed to just watching the film, it literally catalyzes a response synesthetically from the narration and the words taking up, left brain, lateral sort of things, and then the music, and then the visionary stuff, which really brings you on a complete synesthetic journey. And it's as close as you can get to the real thing without doing it. And even then, it's got some of the essence in it. So my words and my media are my medicine. Yeah, and you can find that at aya-awakenings.com.
beautiful.